Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today what I'd like to go through is I'd like to show you how you can use a ball to improve the range of motion of your hip. Now it's a really important skill to master because if you have some hip bursitis, you have low back pain, knee pain, groin pain, pelvic pain, we know massage can be quite helpful and stretching can be quite helpful, but being able to use a ball to try and improve the range of motion and the pliability of those tissues can be a really great way to gain some control over your symptoms and to help improve them ultimately. So before we get into it, obviously, if you do go on to enjoy the video, please leave a like below and consider subscribing just so that you can catch up with all the content that we're putting out. But without further ado, let's have a look. So, simple thing you can use, tennis ball or a lacrosse ball, depending on how hard or brutal you want to be with yourself. If you are doing this because you're painful, then obviously something that's a little bit less tight, a little bit less dense is really good. If there's less pain, it just feels more tight and stiff, then obviously a harder lacrosse ball can be quite useful. So for the purposes of today's video, we'll use the tennis ball. And what we want to go through is we want to make sure that we're addressing sort of three main areas of the hip that tends to get tight. The muscles tend to get tight, the soft tissue tends to get a bit glued down. And when you use that ball in probably two different ways to sort of improve the way that that functions. And then hopefully that'll have a positive effect on your pain. So the first thing we want to do is we want to aim for the heart of your glutes. So where your back pocket would be, right in the middle where your piriformis and some of those deep tissues can be. And most people who've had a massage in here before know that it can be quite tender. So being able to settle that down with the ball is really useful. So we want to place that basically in the middle there. And then we want to lie down on top of the ball and then obviously rolling across to that side. Now, one of the things that I like to do is I like to put your hip in a bit of a stretched position. So often we can put you in this sort of figure four position where you have your one foot on your opposite leg. You can sit up a little bit if you want to, but all I want you to do is move the ball around until you find a spot that feels quite tight. And then what we want to do here is we want to do one of two things. We either want to get your muscles activated by engaging your brain, so that basically looks like tensing. So if you tense the muscle over the top of that, hold it for a couple of seconds and then relax, you might find that there's less tenderness. It feels a little bit nicer and the ball sinks in a little bit more. So I'm going to repeat that and give it a squeeze, tense those glutes, hold it for a few seconds and then relax. And then again, it should feel less tender. Hopefully that muscle gives a little bit more as well. So that tense relaxing really helps sort of deactivate and sort of stretch that tissue out in a really safe way. Now the other thing that we can do here is we can use movement to improve this. So once you've found a spot that feels quite tight and tender, so for me, this spot here feels a little bit more than it did before. What I can do is I can move my knee in and out, or I can bring my knee up towards me with the other leg, basically trying to floss that tissue free. So we're pinning the tissue down with the ball. We're using movement to pull that tissue past that. So we can do some rotation as well, but it's a really good way to quickly free up that tissue. The second part of things is we're looking at more at the side. So you've got some glutes that attach from the top of the pelvis into the sort of the bony bit at the side of the hip, and it can sit sort of at the front as well as just behind. So we want to go looking for that as well. So again, with the tennis ball, we're going to place the ball above the hip bone, above the bone at the side of the hip. So not higher than the crest of the hip, but the actual bump itself. We want to be in between that. And we'll start for me by going back a little bit. So we're more in the glutes. And again, same thing. We want to take a breath. We want to tense that muscle up, hold it for a few seconds, then relax. Take a breath in, tense that muscle, hold it for a few seconds, and then relax. And again, that tenderness will subside a little bit, and you'll feel like the ball sinks in a little bit deeper as those muscles give. And then the second part of this is we want to add movement. So with my leg, I can rotate my leg in and out to shear that sort of tissue free in a really, really simple way. Or I can bend that knee up and do the same thing. And this will be a little bit more tender for a lot of people. It puts more pressure directly on your hip. But again, do this as best as you feel comfortable. But same thing, it should start to improve the quality of your range of motion and start to go a little bit further, potentially each time. And once you've done that, we want to roll forward a little bit more, so on the TFL, which is often sort of tight and tender for a lot of people who particularly have ITB syndrome, again, hip bursitis, lower back pain, those sorts of things. This can get quite tight. So we're sort of, if you draw a line down the side of me, we're a little bit forward of that line at the moment, still above the bump of the hip. And same thing again. I'm going to find a tight spot here. Take a deep breath in, squeeze, hold that for a few seconds, make that muscle work, then relax. Again, find another spot that feels a little bit tender. Take a deep breath in, squeeze, and then relax. And again, same as the other ones, the tenderness should start to subside. Again, if you quite sort of begin with, it might take a little bit longer, but every time you do this, you should feel a little bit better each time. And again, it feels like it sinks in a bit easier as well. And the same thing that we did before, we can start to turn that leg, that foot up and down, or we can bend the knee up and do the same thing. It's a little bit harder in this position, but the point being is that any movement will help shear that free, and it feels nicer and nicer. Now, the third part of the hip that often gets tight is the front of the hip. So if hit directly at the back, more so at the side, but we also want to hit the front of that hip as well, where there can be your hip flexors and also part of your quad that comes up and attaches to the front of that hip. So again, we want to get the ball into those areas as well. So again, how this looks, we're going to place that sort of directly in the middle and then just lying on top of it. And then same thing as before, we want to go moving around. So you can come up towards that hip bone, the pointy part at the front of your hip. If you come in from that, you'll find some hip flexor. And if you come down from that, you'll find a little bit more of the sort of the top of your quads. So we want to basically find a spot that feels tight for you. Same thing again, deep breath in, give a squeeze, tense everything for a few seconds, and then relax. Again, it feels less tender, it sinks in easier. Same thing again, breath in, tense everything, hold it for a few seconds, and then relax. And then what we can do here is same thing as before. We can use that movement. So I'm turning my foot in and out here, trying to shear free some of that tightness. What you can also do is you can also pick up that knee, tense your glute, pick up that knee and try and pull that tissue past the ball, and it will free it up in no time at all. So what we can hopefully find here is by using a ball, it's a very specific way to go hunting around your hip, front, side and back, to find the tender spots, but also to find the tight spots that may not be as tender as the more obvious tender spots. But the point being is that once you find something tender or tight, you can use different techniques to sort of gently work your way through the pain or past the pain and through the tissue and try and restore some normal motion by incorporating movement on top of that. So again, if you have any lower back problems, any hip problems, any knee problems, groin, pelvis, whatever it may be, there's very likely going to be some hip dysfunction there that you can start to chip away at with the ball. And as a physical therapist, there aren't too many things that I can do clinically with my hands for you that you can't do a really good job with, or at least a good job with, just with a ball. So again, tennis ball or lacrosse ball, you can use any ball with the density that you feel is hitting the right mark for you, and then making sure that you stand up and walk around afterwards to see that there's actually a genuine change. And just by doing those two different techniques in those different areas, every single time you do it, you should stand up and walk around and feel like you've actually made a genuine impact. And if you've got genuine pain in an area that you're trying to settle, then you should hopefully feel like there's more range of motion, more room to move. You may see an immediate decrease or a suppression of your pain, but long term, you're going to be taking a lot of those handbrakes off the area to allow that irritated, dysfunctional area to feel better. So again, you can do a lot with the ball. So that's basically today's video. And if you went on to enjoy it, if you find it useful, please leave a like below and consider subscribing. It does help the channel out. The algorithm for YouTube obviously demands that these sort of things take place so the video can reach more people. So if you'd like to help us grow, it'd be fantastic if you could leave a like or subscribe as well. So again, these videos are coming out relatively frequently, so please keep an eye on the channel. But until next time, thanks for stopping by.